Well, let's do a little bit of a follow-up here. Hey everyone, I'm Jack Fossett. Welcome to Real Guitar Talk, and today I actually want to follow up on a video I did a couple of weeks ago where I was discussing these new Gibson-inspired Epiphone models that are on the higher end, both in quality and in price. Now, I came right out and said, great guitars, but I'm not entirely thrilled with where the company is going and the direction that they're taking these. Now, I did talk about it in great length in that video, but I wanted to do a combination of things. I wanted to clarify my stance because I think sometimes with a video like that, a company like Epiphone and Gibson, you've got a lot of dedicated fans. You've also got a lot of people who just outright hate them. And the comments were, let's say, very passionate about one side or the other. A lot of great discussion, though, a lot of great points. So I wanted to clarify my stance on it, talk about it a little bit further, and also answer some of the things that people were saying directly, rather than just, be one of those people who posts a video and then doesn't really do anything about it afterwards. So if you haven't heard what's going on, Epiphone is coming out with some Gibson models that are on the higher end based on more custom shop Gibson models. Now, they're great guitars from what I've played. I did a review of the two Firebirds, the Firebird 1 and the Firebird 7. They're exceptionally expensive. And that's what's really putting a lot of people off, but a lot of people are saying, well, no, they're priced appropriately, and then the conversation just goes from there. What I wanted to clarify, first of all, is to say the two things that I'm not really thrilled about seeing are, number one, I think they're priced too high for what they are. Number two, it's more about Gibson ceding territory to Epiphone that they're not taking care of, or offering some kind of reasonable alternative themselves. And this is boosting the price of import guitars and kind of, I don't think, doing a very good thing for the made in the United States guitar department. Now, why is that important? Why is where it's made important? Well, where it's made is actually very important and very significant to this entire thing. Keeping the political side out of it, which is significant to a lot of people, but keeping that entirely out of it, you have to look at the reason that companies send production where they do. It actually doesn't have to do with whether or not it's a quality guitar, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people have said, like, well, why does it matter where it's made if it's a quality guitar? It has to do with perceived value. The perception of where it's made absolutely affects the value and what you're getting and what you should be spending. Now, I said one thing that was not entirely true in the last video, and so I want to correct myself on that. I said Epiphone's never really done a high-end line of Gibson guitars like they're doing now. That's not entirely true. One of the lines that they did in the past that I actually loved was the Epiphone Elitist line. Now, the Epiphone Elitist line, regardless of the absolutely awful name of the models, right? Like, who wants to, hopefully we're all trying to not be elitists, but that's neither here nor there. The Elitist line, what was cool about them was they had as many Epiphone models as they did Gibson models. I really want to see Epiphone honoring their company's heritage from before they started making copies of Gibsons, which are many. They made loads of great guitars, solid body guitars, archtop guitars, semi-hollow body guitars. There are just tons of great Epiphones of the past that are not in the Gibson line. I would love to see Epiphone do more to honor that history. The Elitist line had, I believe it had a casino. Well, I know it had a casino because I own an Elitist casino. It had a casino, it had a Sheridan, and it had a Broadway, which were the Epiphone models. And it had a Les Paul, it had an SG, and it had an ES335 that were the Gibson-based models. You can feel free to let me know if there were any that I'm missing there, but I believe those were the 6 Elitists that you could buy. They might have made a Riviera at one point too, Epiphone Riviera. Yeah, I think they did. One of the important things, and again, this is going back to the perception, is they were made in Japan. And Japan is known for having extremely talented high-end luthiers. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Gretsch guitars, the high-end Gretsch guitars, they're not made in the USA, they're made in Japan, which is really not about outsourcing it. It's because they're making great guitars over there. Are they able to make wonderful guitars in China? Absolutely, you bet they are. But the question you have to ask is, why is the company sending production there? Are they sending it there because they're making a superior guitar, or are they sending it there because they can get it done for cheaper? And therein lies the issue. The issue lies in kind of like, what is the company trying to get away with as far as the price? Which leads to the second part of it. Obviously, a lot of you mentioned, well, they have custom shop appointments and all this. And first of all, I would say that when you're talking about a guitar in its whole, you're not just talking about the sum of its materials. A lot of what goes into a guitar for price and for quality is the craftsmanship. So it's either a custom shop guitar or it's not. What I would say is it's a production level mass produced guitar that have custom shop appointments. Because if it's actually a custom shop guitar, if these are actually like handmade by people, then the price is way too low. The price is actually like, wow, you're seriously taking advantage of workers. If they're a mass-produced guitar, then I think the price is a little high, because things like people mentioned the custom buckers, you know, being like a $500 or $600 pickup set. Well, Gibson's not paying anywhere near that amount to produce those. In fact, I would be shocked if Gibson was paying much more to produce a set of custom buckers than they are to produce many of their other humbucker sets. And this is, again, where I'm kind of like, geez, I wish they would have just, if they were 20% cheaper, no problem whatsoever. But they're just high enough and just kind of, I think, using marketing gimmicks enough where, from my position, doing YouTube reviews where I want to share with you my honest opinion on what's a good buy, what's not a good buy, what should you be looking at, that's where this is all coming from. So I'm just trying to chat with you all kind of my perspective and what I think about this based on everything that I've played, everything that I've seen. Now, I also want to say, if any of you bought this and you love it, absolutely good for you. Like I said, I played the Firebirds. I think they were great. I'd have absolutely no problem playing one of those out, recording with one. I think they're really cool guitars. I just think they're overpriced. If you don't think they're overpriced, that's absolutely fine. In fact, I've actually bought guitars that were overpriced before. Sometimes I liked them, sometimes I didn't. You know, this is all just sort of a consumer response situation. Now, when we talk about Gibson ceding territory to Epiphone, Gibson's a funny company when it comes to this. And sometimes they've done it really well, and sometimes they've been really like, what are you doing? First of all, again, I think Gibson are making great guitars. I have no problem with modern Gibson or Epiphone quality since the 2017, I think it was 2017, changeover. The issue is Gibson not making enough models that are kind of more in that reasonably priced territory. Now, when I started playing guitar, I'll give you a great example. SGs, they've always seemed to kind of get right. They've always done a good job with their SGs. And when I started playing, you could get the SG Faded, then you could get the SG Special. The SG Special was like the SG Faded, but with gloss, which I think a lot of people just got the Faded because you were basically just buying a gloss finish for like $300 more or something. Then you had the SG Standard, which was the big Batwing one, great guitars. Then you jumped up to the SG61 reissue, which was the early 60s style, when it was the Les Paul, it was the half guard size. And then you would get up to like custom shop ones. Well, they also might have had a couple others in there, and there was certainly some changeover. But basically, you had really cool steps of vintage-inspired guitars at different levels for anyone who wanted a Gibson at a certain price. And nowadays, they actually have that pretty well in hand with the SG, right? You can get an SG Special. Obviously, they're a bit more expensive now than they used to be, but, you know, inflation and all that. You can get an SG Special, a dual P90 one. Then you go up to the SG Standard, again, the Batwing. Then you go up to the 61 style, again, still, and then before you get up to some of the higher-end ones. Les Pauls, they've kind of done something with, but it's been a little bit weird. You know, like, for instance, one of my favorite guitars in history that they've made is the Les Paul Classic, which is a great guitar, but they've always had a hard time figuring out, like, what does classic mean, right? You hear at Les Paul Classic and you're like, oh, okay, it's going to be kind of like a vintage Les Paul, except then it has, you know, like ceramic humbuckers and things. And nowadays, the Les Paul Classic, very cool guitar, but it has coil splitting. And I'm like, you know, it's like, it's a cool guitar. It's a cool Les Paul, but I don't really know that I'd call that the classic when it has modern. Regardless, there are still several steps of Les Pauls. They don't currently make regular production Firebird. They also don't currently make a more reasonably priced ES model, right? It's you jump in at the super high end, somewhere around $3,000 for an ES335 or an ES339 or a 345, whereas before they were making more reasonably priced, lower, I don't want to say lower end, but like, you know, more accessible ES guitars. You had the 135 series, you had the 137 series, which were totally awesome. They used to have one that was the ES333, which was basically like a 335 faded, and then it just had the decal on the headstock. There were a number of models they used to do. Hey, since Gibson seems more in tune with their history, why don't they do a 225 at a more reasonable price? Something that people can get an actual Gibson ES guitar at a more reasonable, that was it was the Florentine cutaway with dual dog ear P90s. You don't need to have the neck binding. You can have the decal on the headstock instead of the inlay. I would be thrilled if Gibson was putting out a model like that. Now, obviously, Epiphone wants to be producing guitars that are respectable, and there have been times when Epiphone was, there have been some rough times with Epiphone when they were making guitars that were pretty low end, and it's not that they couldn't make higher end guitars, it's that they were producing what was asked of them. It's not a bad thing at all that Epiphone is making some higher end guitars. I think what they've come out with and what you're getting, they're asking a little too much for what it is. And that's my issue with it. I would be thrilled to see Epiphone do something more like reviving the Elitist line with high-end Gibson models as well as high-end Epiphone models. It wouldn't be that hard to see them made in Korea or made in Japan. Again, is that perception versus actual quality? Yeah, but perception drives market value, and for many of us, guitars are, not every guitar is going to be like an heirloom piece that you pass down to your children. When you're in difficult times, you frequently unload guitars to pay the bills. And they're riding the name more than I want to see. So this is another point that a lot of people brought up. They said, well, why does it matter what it says on the headstock? Why does it matter that it's Epiphone versus Gibson if you're just getting a good guitar that's what it is? Well, let's take that a step further. Why does it matter what the exact shape of the guitar is, right? Why does it matter that it's an ES 355? Why not just get a high-end Ibanez? Why not get a D'Angelico? Why not get a Sire? Why not get one of these guitars that are priced a little bit lower, but still getting you a super quality guitar for less money? You can really take that road as far as you want. The fact of the matter is that we all, to a certain extent, many of us, I should say, many of us want to play stuff that we perceive is like what our guitar heroes play. And I think Gibson is just kind of this side of trying to take advantage of that. Yeah, obviously it's a big corporation. They're trying to make money. They've got really, really high overhead. They've got tons of marketing expenses. They're doing their big Gibson garage thing. They're doing all kinds of stuff, and they need money for it. What do you do when you do that? You drive prices up. I'm just saying that these are a bit overpriced, especially considering that there are other options out there that are more reasonable. Ever hear of CMG guitars? CMG guitars are made in the United States, and they have like Boutique Pickups, that is a company that's associated with them, for a fraction of the price of a Gibson, and I believe for less money than some of these Epiphone ones. Why not get that instead? A lot of people aren't getting those. Maybe many of you haven't heard of them, but maybe part of it is, but you want something that you sort of feel is more authentic. Now, the last point is that a lot of people brought up, well, what if they had just put Gibson on the headstock and not had it be a thing? What if they just decided to make a Gibson import brand, kind of like these other guitar brands have done? PRS, they're doing the SE line. It still says PRS on the headstock. Fender, obviously, they've had a multitude of guitars made in Mexico for a long time, also made in China and made in Indonesia and other places. Why didn't Gibson just put their name on this and decide to have an import side of Gibson? I don't know. I don't know that that would have made a difference. I don't know if they could have done other things, like had it be a little more of like an assembled in the United States with the parts coming from someplace else. Some people brought up, why didn't they revive Orville? There's all kinds of ways this could go different. This is just a consumer response video. Please, again, let us know what you think in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.